All right, I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I just think the world of you. I love how honest you are. You say what you feel and what you think, and I love that about you.
Suffered a medical emergency while shooting a reality show in Santa Paula, California. Police confirmed the TV personality fell ill Friday night. Her son Jack posting about the incident on social media, thanking the outpouring of support. And
Sharon Osbourne has survived almost everything life could throw at her. Stage 3 colon cancer, a double mastectomy, decades of music industry chaos, and a marriage tested by addiction and betrayal. But in late 2022, she faced something that couldn't be fought through with sheer determination. The warning signs pointed back to a tragedy that had already devastated her family years earlier. What really happened to Sharon's father? And could history be repeating itself? Join us as we reveal the scenes surrounding Sharon Osbourne's decline. The gene she couldn't escape. To understand what is happening to Sharon Osbourne now, you have to go back a decade. Back to 2015, when Sharon and Ozzy underwent advanced genomic testing at a university in England. Back to the kind of testing that goes beyond the usual blood work and examines every cell, chromosome, and gene in the body. The results took 3 months to return. And when they did, they left a dent in everyone's heart. The tests revealed that Sharon carried 2 of the 4 gene mutations directly linked to Alzheimer's disease. According to the reports, she had just mildly escaped the 2 most aggressive variants of Alzheimer's, but that didn't mean anything because the one she had came in her genes from birth, and even though it wasn't as severe, it was still fatal. For most people, that kind of news would feel abstract, like something to worry about in the distant future. But for Sharon, it was deep and devastatingly personal. And it was because of her family's bad history with Alzheimer's. Sharon's father, music industry titan Don Arden, had died of Alzheimer's disease in 2007 at the age of 81. When it attacked him, she had to watch him disappear piece by piece. Little by little, the sharp and formidable man she had both feared and loved slowly got reduced to something else entirely, by some disease he had now transferred to her. His memories, personality, and ability to recognize the people around him were gone in no time, and there was nothing she or all their riches could do about it. She had described it publicly as the most soul-destroying disease she had ever witnessed, and now science was telling her that the same thing lived inside her own DNA. She spoke about it openly at the time of her diagnosis, not failing to hide anything from the fans she adored. She said that she hated the fact that there was nothing she could do to prevent it, and that people had told her to do puzzles and take supplements, but she had watched her father, who was way more mentally sharp and active than her, fall to this disease. She also pointed to Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, 2 of the most intellectually driven public figures of the 20th century, both of whom eventually got consumed by dementia. And that, she said, was exactly what really frightened her. So when she collapsed without warning in late 2022, unconscious for 20 minutes while filming, the fear that had been living quietly in the back of her mind for 7 years came soaring to the front. She was rushed to one hospital, transferred to another, subjected to 2 days of exhaustive testing. And the conclusion doctors reached was not reassuring. They could not explain it. Even though it was in her genes, there was no reason why it had decided to show itself on that random shoot day. Through the various tests, neurologically or cardiovascularly, no clear cause was identified. Sharon told the UK version of the talk in January 2023 that it was the strangest and most frightening experience of her life. To her, it meant it was already getting serious deep inside her. She knew these signs were a countdown to an inevitable outcome, and from that point forward, she raced to protect everything she had built from day one. But before that, she got hit with something else. The scandal that left her with nothing to lose. For 11 years, Sharon Osbourne had been a co-host on CBS daytime talk show, The Talk. It was her kingdom. It was the platform where she had rebuilt her public identity after stepping back from music management, where she had connected with a daily audience of millions, and where she had done what she had always done best, saying exactly what she thought, without the need to apologize to anyone. The show paid her millions annually, and it was also the financial foundation that made Ozzy's increasingly complex medical care possible. Then came March 10, 2021. During a live discussion about racism allegations being directed at her longtime friend, Piers Morgan, following his comments about Meghan Markle, Sharon became defensive on air. You see, Piers and Meghan were online friends who were meant to meet for drinks in 2016. But after she met Prince Harry that same night, she ghosted Piers Morgan. Feeling snubbed, he spent years launching fierce media attacks against her, and it peaked in 2021 when he publicly doubted her suicidal thoughts, sparking massive outrage and causing a few dramatic episodes on Good Morning Britain. The conversation escalated, and Sharon grew visibly frustrated with her co-host Cheryl Underwood and made a series of statements that were immediately clipped, shared, and condemned across social media within hours. The hashtag demanding her firing began trending worldwide before the episode had even finished airing. CBS launched an investigation and placed the show on hiatus. Former colleagues distanced themselves publicly, and stories emerged from behind the scenes about Sharon's alleged behavior over the years. Whether these accounts were accurate, exaggerated, or selectively timed did not matter, because in those moments, the verdict from the court of public opinion arrived long before any facts were even brought to be properly examined. And to combat these damaging takes being thrown at her, Sharon hurriedly tried to bury the narrative. She hired crisis management firms, released apologies, and attended what she described as some sort of racial sensitivity training. But nothing slowed the momentum of the backlash, because in April 2021, CBS announced that she would not be returning on air. The official statement said her behavior during the March 10th episode had not aligned with their values for a respectful workplace. And just like that, her 40 years spent in the entertainment industry fell on its head. The blacklisting that followed was swift and thorough. Industry events stopped inviting her. Producers stopped calling. People who had celebrated at her parties leaned on her for advice and counted on her professional support crossed the street, rather than staying on lanes to acknowledge her. The isolation she faced after was no joke. For a woman who had spent basically her entire adult life taped to the spotlight, it was extra rough losing every bit of attention in every room she walked into. Meanwhile, her husband, Ozzy, by then was deep into his battle with Parkinson's disease and was no longer able to tour or work at his previous level. And coupled with this sadness, he had to watch his wife's downfall without the means to help. The man who had built his career on being uncontrollable found himself helpless to protect the person who had protected him for 4 decades. It was a role reversal neither of them had been prepared for. And that period reportedly brought so much hurt to both of them in ways they couldn't imagine. Sharon later admitted that apart from mentally, the stress caused by the destruction of her public image had also taken a serious physical toll on her. Sleep became impossible to achieve, her appetite disappeared, and she lost weight visibly and rapidly. Friends who saw her during this period described her as looking more sickly than they had ever seen before. The woman who was the face of absolute control was now a shadow of her former self. And underneath all of it, the genetic illness she had been aware of since 2015 kept eating at her. When the caretaker needed care. By the time Sharon collapsed in 2022, the dynamic inside the Osbourne household had already shifted dramatically. Part of it was because of what happened after Ozzy publicly disclosed his Parkinson's diagnosis in January 2020, confirming what had been speculated since a serious fall in 2019 left him requiring multiple surgeries. Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurological condition that attacks the brain's ability to control movement. Over time, it causes tremors, muscle rigidity, slowed movement, balance problems, and in many cases, cognitive changes. There is no cure for it, and although management is possible, anytime it appears, it basically means the inevitable is on its way. Before his diagnosis, Ozzy was the indomitable Prince of Darkness, a wild, unpredictable rock icon fueled by chaotic energy and legendary stamina. Parkinson's and spinal injuries stripped away that fierce autonomy, turning the larger-than-life frontman into a vulnerable, physically dependent man. He became confined by medical routines, fighting a heartbreaking psychological battle against his own locked, declining body. During that time, Sharon had become Ozzy's primary caregiver, especially in the moments immediately after the diagnosis was revealed. When interviewed about it, she spoke publicly about knowing when his coffee needed to be at a certain temperature, at a specific time, and in the cups he liked. According to her, she did this because she noticed how much these actions reduced his anxiety and helped keep his tremors more manageable. She understood his rhythms, his medications, and the signs that indicated he was feeling bad without having him say anything. She had become, in every practical sense, his external nervous system. She had also watched his ability to walk deteriorate to the point where, by early 2023, he required round-the-clock assistance. During these moments, she shared with interviewers that while his physical mobility had been severely compromised, his voice remained strong, which became the driving force behind what would eventually become the Black Sabbath farewell concert, which was a last-chance performance he hosted to say goodbye to the fans he had felt he owed a proper ending. Yes, it is normal for partners to perform actions like this to their significant other, but something was different here. Sharon was doing all of this while also managing the fear about what was happening inside her own body. The cognitive episodes had become worse after her collapse, and coupled with that, she was feeling slower as the days went by. She had spent decades controlling people and negotiating contracts in rooms full of people who underestimated her, building and protecting an empire through sheer intelligence and willpower. Now she was sitting in financial meetings, staring at documents she had personally designed just months earlier, unable to connect the numbers on the page to the meaning she knew they once held. And after keeping it a secret for such a long time, she decided to reveal her predicament to her husband. The conversation reportedly happened on a quiet evening in their living room. By all accounts, after she dropped the news, the both of them sat in silence, staring at each other in acceptance. They had gone through a series of things together, and now they were both met with an enemy they could not overcome. The health crisis happening inside the Osbourne home didn't happen alone. It unfortunately collided with a family that was already carrying decades of complicated history, and the pressure beneath all the weight cracked things that had never fully healed. The family at breaking point. Sharon had always been the center of gravity for her children. She was the backbone as Amy, Kelly, and Jack grew up inside one of the most publicly scrutinized households in television history. Even their TV show, The Osbournes, which ran on MTV from 2002 to 2005, put their family's daily dysfunction on air for all to watch, turning their disputes into one of the most watched reality shows of its era. Truth is, Sharon had negotiated that deal herself, believing that sharing their lives openly would create a better connection, build their brand, and ultimately protect the family's financial future. But what she had not fully accounted for was how her children experienced being the source for content, and also that they disliked her for pushing them into it. In fact, not only her, it also ruined their relationship with one another, causing Amy to remain distant, sharing a rather complex bond with the other two. Years later, the reckoning arrived. Her children, now adults with families of their own, began voicing the trauma of a life lived on camera. They spoke of invaded privacy and package dysfunction, but the conversation eventually turned to a more cold, clinical topic, the topic of inheritance. During the meeting, they all reportedly launched attacks on her. Jack, now a grounded advocate for sobriety, pushed for formal legal structures. He demanded clarity on the estate and a management system that didn't rely on Sharon's increasingly clouded judgment. Kelly, the public face of the Osbourne brand, raised different concerns. She warned Sharon that her visible decline was hurting the business. In a tense family call, she pointed to a recent interview where Sharon lost her thread and forgot names. To Sharon, this was a betrayal. The woman who had spent 40 years protecting the Osbourne legacy was now being labeled its greatest liability. Amy, the most private sibling, provided the most painful blow. She arrived in silence, signed the necessary documents, and left without a word, causing her mother to feel neglected by even the eldest of her kids. This caused negotiations to collapse, and the siblings went their separate ways. But the story took its final turn on a summer morning in 2025. But that wasn't the end of their story. Just as they were thinking of legal proceedings regarding both their parents, one died. The race against time to preserve oneself. Ozzy Osbourne died on July 22, 2025, of cardiac arrest at the age of 76. By this time, he had gotten his farewell. The final Black Sabbath concert had happened. But for Sharon, his death removed the last structure her days had been built around. Before his death, in 2024, she had already appeared on Celebrity Big Brother in the UK, a choice that surprised many observers who expected her to retreat from public life completely after her cancelling in 2021. But what they didn't know was that, regardless of their decision to boycott her, she had made a conscious decision not to disappear, but to fight against all odds. She also decided not to succumb to her sickness, the controversies regarding her will, or the death of her husband. She had begun working with archivists and writers to document her life in her own words, wanting the raw reality rather than the polished narrative constructed by decades of public relations. She wanted the public to read and digest the true story of her life. A woman who grew up in a violent household run by a father who once tried to have her killed, who fell in love with one of rock history's most self-destructive men and turned him into a global empire, who survived cancer twice and built Ozfest from nothing, who was fired from the biggest platform of her later career in a single afternoon, and who now faced the possibility that the very disease that took her father was quietly making its way toward her. She also moved toward charitable foundations and created an NGO focused on giving to those who have, in one way or the other, suffered from Parkinson's. She also created a funding group to help and counsel those who were suffering from addiction. And finally, she raised a committee whose core aim was to support families navigating neurological disease. Basically, she wanted to convert everything she had lived through into something she could leave behind. The burden she has been living with since 2015 has not changed. Carrying Alzheimer's-linked gene mutations does not mean a guaranteed diagnosis, but it does mean elevated risk. And for Sharon, she will patiently wait for her turn to come. What Sharon Osbourne is doing now is exactly what she has always done when backed into a corner. She is refusing to go quietly, forcing the world to see her clearly, on her own terms, and before time makes that impossible. Whether that means interviews that go places publicists would prefer they didn't, or charitable work that carries her name into venues that will outlast her, or simply showing up in public when retreat would be easier, the logic is the same one that has governed her entire life. She will not wait to be remembered. She will make sure she is. Regarding her will, today, Sharon Osbourne controls the $220 million Osbourne estate through structured family trusts created with her late husband, Ozzy, before his passing. She holds lifetime management over his name, likeness, and assets, ensuring the fortune stays within the family. Notably, Ozzy's will includes a romantic provision for Sharon to receive a dozen black roses weekly. Upon Sharon's passing, the remaining wealth will be divided equally among their children, with Kelly and Jack serving as estate executors. To secure the family's future, Amy's portion is protected in a trust, and the couple's properties, including their $17 million Los Angeles mansion, are being consolidated. Regardless of how hard Sharon might have treated her children, was that attitude deserved in your opinion? And what do you think of her legacy so far? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.